What is going on, guys? Benny here. We're here today to talk about this beautiful piece. This is the Triangle Thetas. So this is from their signature line. So let's check it out after the intro. Alright guys, so we have here the Triangle Thetas. So what do I say much about this? So this is a super high-end speaker from their signature line. This is, let's throw up a specification sheet here. So with this guy, this is a 2-bass reflex design. I believe it goes down to 45 hertz is what it is. The minimum impedance for it is 4.4 ohms, and then in terms of the nominal ohms, it has it on the back of the speaker and it's 8 ohms, and then it handles up to, I believe, 100 watts. 90 to 100 watts is the nominal wattage range. What do we say about this? Because this looks very similar to the Guinness Trio, but I believe the huge bump in price obviously is usually the crossover, and that's kind of where the thing changes. So in terms of that, the components that are used and everything, that's when it goes from like a kind of a middle of the range speaker to super high end is when they start throwing really good components into this guy. So up here we have a aluminum horn tweeter. I know, that sounds kind of crazy, right? Like when you look at this thing, it's got like a little phase plug. It looks like a needle sticking out. You could probably see it up there, maybe. But with that, it seems like it would just throw so much resolution at you or your brain's gonna be scrambled, right? But it doesn't, definitely doesn't. And then in terms of this guy, it's a 6.5 paper driver, which is nice. So similar to their more budget line, like the BR03s that I reviewed, I'll throw that up in a card up here. It makes it sound more natural for basically instruments. And then you have this really big porthole on the bottom. So, and when you look at at least for me, when I see a porthole like this, you would assume this thing puts out gigantic amounts of bass. And it doesn't, it really doesn't. But it does reach down to that 45 hertz, I believe is what it goes down to. It does reach down there. So with a couple of the tracks that I used to test, basically all my streaming playlists, as well as some vinyl that I had in, that I did test it on. But yeah, it doesn't throw tons of bass at you. Like, it's not super bass heavy, but it's present. The shape of this is very odd too. So I have the grill. This does come with a grill. It uses magnets, and that goes into these little peg holes here, and it just sticks on it. It's really strong neodymium magnets. So if you do buy these and you need to take the grill off, make sure you have a hold on the speaker, because you'll pull the speaker off the stand. That's how strong the actual magnets are in that. But the shape of this guy is quite different. Kinda spin him around here. So you can't really see it, but it cuts off back there. This is not a square. It's more shaped like a football, which is a little strange, right? You would assume that, like, why is it shaped like a football? So in terms of that, basically what it does is it helps the speaker be more inert. So there's a lot less resonation from the cabinet, and it basically dissipates the sound reflections inside the speaker to make it sound correct and how they want it to sound. But one thing about this guy, it's braced very well, but what I've heard in this is it does have resonance, but they use resonance to make the sound go, which is not a normal thing. So whatever they did to make this speaker, they did an amazing job at it. And for about 4K, I believe is what it goes for, around $4,000 for a pair of these. Not cheap, but it should sound good, and they obviously know what they're doing. Because a lot of these similar sounds and tones are found in the BR03s, which is amazing. That trickle-down technology is amazing. Kind of went over all the pieces. One of the favorite things I have here, I'll throw up a little overlay, is these binding posts. The binding posts back here and the little mirror finish on the back. I'll have some overlays for that. But yeah, they're beautiful. The little mirror finish with the nameplate on it, and then like these binding posts are the the most high-end binding posts I've ever seen, and they've got to be either like aluminum or something, because they're heavy duty. They do a really good job. What else? So what's the experience, right? What is the experience? One thing I did notice, it's not really a negative for this guy, but what I did notice is when I would have these on the stands in here, my seating arrangement is about 6 feet behind, about 3 feet behind this camera. I'm about 2 feet away from the camera, so about 6-7 feet away. And then I slightly toe them in. And that seat is a little bit low. It's a little low. It's basically just a bench, and I sit on it, and it's my normal sitting placement. But what I did notice is if my ear is like right here, if it's in line with this space, like right in the middle of this main driver, what ends up happening is, in my room at least, in my room, I usually lay down a carpet in here, and then I have a popcorn ceiling, and then insulation on this side, insulation on that side. So this is a very non-echoey room when I'm doing my listening testing. So when I have my ear from anywhere from the middle of this driver to a little, like, it's really, it's really touchy. So wherever you're sitting, try to get your ear as close to in between here, or even as close to this tweeter, which is kind of a normal thing. But the one thing that disappears when my ear goes down to this level is the bass. It becomes kind of flat, and I can't hear or feel those bass tones. So it's very strange. It feels very directional in that manner. So obviously, again, just have your ear above the center of this driver and you'll be good for bass sound. And then also where I'm sitting, this is about 6 feet away from this back wall. So I'm not setting them near a wall for reflections for bass. So you kind of have an idea of what this room is like. And with that, so the bass in these, start with the lows, I guess. So the bass in these is great. It's very natural sounding. It doesn't overextend itself to try to reach down in those depths to where a bass, like a bass heavy speaker, it knows where it needs to be and it knows when it needs to show up. So in terms of good music that goes with this, I tried this with a lot of my normal women vocals, amazing women vocals on this. Male vocals, a lot of Andrea Bocelli. What else? I did try some rock music on this. Again, it seems like this is kind of like the voice of Triangle, is they play rock really well, like regular mainstream rock. Yeah, again, mainstream rock that's normally played on the radio, like heavy rock, heavy hard rock. But again, being that this is a paper driver, it doesn't do well with metal. So if you guys listen to metal, this is not the speaker to listen to it on. It can't respond fast enough. The paper cone just doesn't keep up. And that's not a bad thing. It's just not meant for that type of music. Again, this is a very audiophile speaker, and Triangle is a very audiophile company. And I do think when it comes to bass extension, the Berea BR03s do sound a little bit better in terms of that regard. And I think they're a little more boosted in the bass and the highs on the Triangle Berea 3s. This, it's trying to give you more of that natural tone and be as exact as it can be, which is great. And that's what most audiophiles want. They want it to be as linear and as analytical as it can be. And I'm not going to say all audiophiles, some do. So when it comes to the mids, very sweet mids. I love them on this speaker. Again, female vocals, male vocals, great sound when it comes to that. They're very sweet. And again, this top end, you think it would be murder to your ears, but it's not. It does that thing that, again, I like comparing it to the lower line. The BR03s is it does this thing where it has really great extension up top. And then in terms of having it have great extension up top, it doesn't murder you with that resolution and the extension. It has just the right amount of information to where it sounds like it has a lot of resolution, but not too much. And it's not shouty in any way, which is great. So in terms of that, we kind of went over each type here. So in terms of music, again, I went back to it. If you're listening to rock music, good for heavy rock music and more mainstream type music. Listening to straight vocals and orchestral music, great. This thing does amazing with strings. When you're listening to strings on these speakers, piano on these speakers, it sounds like the instrument. And it's hard to say, make that known. But if you're a musician at all and you've heard some electronic pianos, some electronic drums, it doesn't emulate it well. These, whenever you're listening to a decent recording, and even an okay recording, this emulates it almost perfect from what I'm hearing. There's no craziness going on, there's no spikes or anything. So in terms of like an all-arounder speaker, I guess if you're listening to any of that type of music, it does everything well, very well. Again, with metal, doesn't do well. It just can't keep up again. And then with that, I would say who to aim this at would be the higher end market, obviously. And if you're kind of in that realm of the higher end, you kind of know what you like and you don't like. And in terms of comparison from like the higher end lines that I've like heard, I haven't like a lot of the higher end stuff around this, I haven't had enough time to evaluate against. And I like to have things A-B'd next to each other, so then I can actually pick them out. And when it comes to more higher end stuff like this, having them right next to each other is the best test, because you could like something in this speaker and hear it, and then 10 minutes later you completely forget how the other one sounded because now you're excited for the new speaker. And that's what ends up happening a lot, especially with higher end gear that isn't meant to be super all around, and it's very specific to what it needs to sound like. So with this guy, would I recommend it at that price range of $4,000? I would say it does. It definitely does, because I have heard other speakers in that realm where this does it a little bit better, because again, you can listen to an okay recording of something, an okay live performance recording, and this doesn't, it's not so resolving where it makes that music and recording sound like crap. And what ends up happening with super high-end gear, a lot of the times it becomes so resolving, you can't really enjoy those worse off recordings because it's so resolving and kind of destroys the feeling of everything that's going on, because then you start picking apart how you do start going into analytical mode, is what I'd say. And a lot of people that are just there for the music and the emotion of music, you kind of lose that because you jump into the analytical realm, and then you're like, oh man, that sounds so good, but then her voice sounds really weird. And it's like, and you start picking apart the song instead of just enjoying it, which is the whole idea of kind of getting into this thing. Unless you're into the gear and you just want it to be very, 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 very so specific to where the point where you're always thinking about the gear and not enough about the music. And some people like that. It's definitely a thing. I love gear as much as the next guy, but if my music doesn't sound good and it's not to my liking, I don't want to listen to it. I don't want to listen to that gear, right? But again, this sounds great enough to where it tussles with those guys in the higher end. And then it also plays nicely with the lower end and mid end. So if you want like kind of like the end game speaker, speakers, these would be great because they fit almost every profile. The only thing is, again, if you listen to lots of metal, not this guy, just not this guy. But if you listen to any other types of music, like I listen to a lot of trap, I listen to a lot of lo-fi. I love lo-fi music, so having these play in the background with lo-fi is amazing. The extension from mids to lows on this guy are so smooth. Like when you hear that in a good lo-fi track and it extends all the way down to that 45 and so smoothly, it's a feeling that most people haven't experienced, honestly. What I did notice though is when I played this on my Cambridge Audio AXR85, I didn't like it nearly as much as when I was playing it on my SVS sound bass that I have in for review. And I think that it has to do with, yeah, the nominal is 100 watts, 100 to 90 watts for this guy, but this guy plays really well and livens up when you jump into having more wattage. So what I would recommend is if you were gonna get this guy, have some wattage on hand, because it helps a lot. Because I did notice when I was listening to my Cambridge, it felt not so much analytical, but kind of bleh. And it didn't sound bad, it didn't sound good, but then I expected a lot more from a speaker of this caliber. I was kind of just like sitting around for weeks, kind of just being like, man, I really wish this would sound better. or you just expect more, right? When it comes out of something like this. And then when I threw it on the sound bass, as funny as that is, that's a $500 amplifier, that has 150 watts per channel. That's the highest one I have in the house right now. And what I noticed is the dynamics livened up, the highs livened up. The mids were a little bit more forward, but not so crazy where it's too noticeable. So if you are gonna get these guys, get an amp that can drive them correctly. 90 to 100, meh. I'd say the 150 watt mark for this guy, 125 watts to 150 watts or higher, go for it. Because I don't listen to music stupid loud, and that works really well to liven up the dynamics of this speaker at lower volumes. So All right, guys. Well, with that is kind of like my overview and review of the Thetas. And I thoroughly enjoyed having these. Again, thank you, Triangle, for sending them out to me for review. And I've thoroughly enjoyed them for too long. Got all that. All right, guys. Also, I'm going to put the review to the Triangle BR03s at the end as well. I will put my subscribe star down below as well, which will be great because if you guys can support me there, all that money is going to go towards gear like this that you want me to review. And then I'll make a list of things that you guys want me to review, and then I'll put them in that order and review them in that order for you. So with that, guys, thank you for stopping by. And again, I hope you have a good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, whenever you're watching this. All right, guys, I will see you in the next one.